you'll see what they have in common is that they're passionate about things and they're going to bring their interests to you. Thank you for coming.
Woo, I made it. Uh-oh. There we go. Alright. My name is Olson. I will be presenting my project to you today. For the start of the project, pretend you don't know that I'm going to restore a motorcycle, so you can go through my thought process. So, when I saw my first senior project 7 years ago, I immediately began thinking about what I may want to present when I was finally a senior. Over the years, those options boiled down to 3. Firstly, I could continue the sibling rivalry, go all out, and build a full-size house. Or I could do the unexpected. I could do the unexpected and master a craft such as couple dancing or slow dancing. And my third option was to use the project as a perfect excuse to acquire something that I had always wanted and that my parents would never get me. As the final decision for senior projects came about during SAT season, it felt appropriate that I treat myself and go with option 3. Now that I knew that I was going to treat myself, I just had to decide to what? I thought, maybe a car, maybe a backyard skate park. But then it came to me. Something that had never been presented before, something I had always wanted, and something my parents would absolutely never get me. As you may have assumed, and as my title gave away a little bit, that was a dirt bike. Now that I decided I wanted a dirt bike, I had to figure out what kind of dirt bike specifically. I hit the internet, did a lot of research, and many names and numbers popped up. Honda, KTM, Suzuki, Yamaha, 125, 250, 450, 2-stroke, 4-stroke. There's many options, but what was at the base of all of this, and what I truly wanted, was a bike that was cheap, that functioned, but also required lots of work to get back to its tip-top shape. Eventually, I landed on this 2001 Honda CR125. This bike was perfect. It only cost me $1,000, and that may seem like a lot to some of you, but in retrospect, for a motorized vehicle, that's not so bad. I could have spent half of that and got something that still functioned, but I would have had to double my money later in the project, replacing all the parts. So this seemed like a pretty good deal. Despite the fact that it was clearly dinged up and looked like it hadn't been cleaned in 15 or 20 years, well, it's only 18 years old, but it still was not in great shape. It functioned though, and that was all that mattered for me. After taking it home, I immediately tried to learn how to ride it. I couldn't help. This had been 18 years of wanting something, and I finally got it. So I tried it out, eventually got it moving, and it was a lot of fun, but I sucked. And eventually it came time for me to put it to rest and start taking it apart. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just decided, leave no two pieces together and ask the questions later. With everything apart, I set up a few guidelines that I wanted to follow over the course of the project. Firstly, I wanted to spend as little money as possible, especially on things that I didn't actually need for the bike to perform. I decided this not only because I knew the bike would be very expensive to maintain and clean up in itself, but also because of course I could replace every part on this bike, spend an extra $1,000, $2,000 to get it working better than it ever had before with factory perfected products that would never require any attention. But that was the easy way out. That would have required no real skill. All I would have known how to do was put bolts back together, take them apart, nothing too extravagant. My second thing was that I wanted to do everything on my own. I wanted to get stuck. I wanted to be confused. I wanted to have no idea what I was doing and get my way out of sticky situations by using manuals made at the time of the bike. So, with everything apart, I started with some of the first steps to restoration. And for me, in my case, that was basic cleaning. As you can tell, on one of the pieces of the shock linkage, everything was covered in dirt, grease, rust. It hadn't been cleaned in a long time, and for me, this required no previous knowledge. I just took out some degreaser, a scrub brush, and took all the dirt off of most of the parts that needed it. This was very satisfying because a part went from looking like total crap to decent. But then I did some more research and found that if I were to just use a buffing wheel on a bench grinder, I could almost scrape off the outer layer of the aluminum and make them shine again, as you can see over on the left, or to your right. I did this to many parts across the bike, and as you can tell, just this one step of scraping off a thin top layer makes a huge difference. My work became much more intricate when I got to the bearings. Here are the bearings in the swing arm and the linkage. Differently from what most people know as a bearing having balls in it, these aren't used for spinning at high speeds. Basically, they have a shaft through them, which will slowly rotate as the rear wheel compresses from impact and the shock absorbs. So these aren't for high-speed spinning, and basically need to just be able to swivel around a shaft. So differently from balls, they have long pins which just rotate inside of a casing. What I thought was just going to need a basic repacking of grease ended up needing almost a full replacement. These were completely rusted shut, and I knew nothing about these. I'd never seen this type of bearing before. But just seeing the image on the right, I could tell that something was wrong, and I had to do some extra work. This would have been very easy for me to just replace. It would have only cost $50 to $70 to put in all new bearings, all 8 of them. But I just decided, once again, I want to get my hands dirty. I want to bring old parts back to life. So I did this. This is the process of restoring just 2 bearings. As you can see, all these little individual pins had built up a thick layer of rust, and I had to grind this off with a metal brush, sometimes even a handheld Dremel with a stone on the end of it. I really should have just bought new ones. It would have saved me hours. It probably took a week to replace all of these. But at the end, it was super satisfying because these things went from being totally stiff, rusted shut, to moving perfectly just as they had when they rolled out of the factory. I only had to replace 2 of them because there was so much rust built up inside that I was taking a chisel and trying to pry and crack out the pins, and the casing got damaged. So I did have to replace 2 of them, but it was also a really interesting process pressing bearings out of the casing, and so that was another thing I learned, but I was a little disappointed that I had to spend some extra money. Next for me was the engine. I was very hesitant to do anything with the engine because, as I say again, I really did have no experience. And it was enough for me to, take apart a bearing, but then to go to an engine that has explosions happening in it constantly and gears working and so much stuff that I had no idea about was so intimidating. But once again, I just decided, take it apart, ask the questions later. I'm really happy I made this decision because if I see an engine from the outside, I have no idea what's going on inside. But taking it apart, seeing the power valve, the water pump, the clutch, everything, even just seeing it immediately gives you a way better idea of what's happening inside. And despite the fact that I didn't actually need to do any real work with the engine as it was functioning fine, it was just a really good experience to be able to take all the gears out, put them back together, make sure everything was spinning smoothly, replace the gaskets. It was a really interesting experience for me, and I'm really glad that I did it. After I was done with the engine, I moved on to do some of my own personal customizations, and I did this mostly through painting. This was one of the more sketchy procedures of my project, as the paint I used is high heat paint, which requires 9 different layers with 3 different coats, and then a curing process done in the oven. Now, in my household, there's only one oven. That's the kitchen oven. That's my father's oven. And, as I'm sure you can assume, coming to cook some nice meals in the morning and having paint fumes fly out at you is not an appealing thing for a chef. So I decided that it might not be smart to continue this, although I was able to do a few parts, and as you can tell, going from the left to the right, the difference of what it looked like before to after was very satisfying. And I did this on the carburetor, shown here, the brake calipers, and some other small fixings across the bike. The second method for painting I used was called powder coating. This was very, very interesting, and something I'd never even heard of before until I started watching videos about, this kind of stuff. Basically, for an understanding of what powder coating is, you have a metal substance that's being coated. That substance is given a charge opposite to the charge of the powder being applied through a gun. You can see the little orange thing. That in the process of the powder being emitted from that gun, it's given an opposite charge than the metal. Therefore, it perfectly sticks to every layer of the metal, evenly covering it, and then that metal object is put into an oven of at least 400 degrees where the powder cures and ends up being a very durable plastic coating that's extremely flexible. Luckily, I found a toaster oven in my neighbor's garbage, very convenient. And I was able to set this up in my garage with an air compressor, a small powder coating kit that I bought on Amazon, and this oven. I use this across different objects, such as the rear shock coil, because of the flexibility of the powder coat. It was perfect for this. If I just go back a bit, comparing the shock on the left to the shock on the right, it was a pretty big difference, and it was really satisfying for me to do this. This was one of the more interesting parts of my project, as it was something I'd never done before, and I was able to yield results that were similar to what I would get off a purchased product. The next thing I moved on to was the frame. I thought about painting the frame, maybe powder coating it for a more durable surface, but I knew that over time, because the insides of your knees really rub up against it when you're riding, I knew that over time the look would start to wear and it would be pretty obvious that it wasn't what it used to be. So I decided to polish it. Polishing it was a pretty smooth process, but requires many different sandpaper grits and then a polishing compound, a buffing grinder, and many other things. But aluminum looks really great polished, as you can tell from the image on the right. The left side of the frame has not been polished, and the right side has, and it's basically a mirror. And I was super happy with this. I had some help with this from friends, but the result was very satisfying. With all the parts basically ready to go back on, I just had to figure out one last thing, and that was the body, which you would think on a car. On a dirt bike, it's called the plastics. The only plastics that fit my bike, being a 2001, they didn't look that great. They were rounded off. You could tell that they were made 18 years ago, and it wasn't what I was looking for. I really wanted to look this on new bikes with the sharper angles, and they just looked a lot faster. I looked into it more, and nothing fit. Literally nothing. Until I found this one company which makes a restyling kit, shown on the right, which essentially allows you to put a new look on an old bike. But unfortunately for me, they only made these for 2002 Hondas and onward. And of course, I bought a 2001, and it was 1 year too late. This was super frustrating because this was the perfect product I was looking for. And I wasn't really willing to give up on it at this point. So I did a little more research and figured out if I were to replace the gas tank, subframe, and airbox on my bike with between a 2002 and a 2007 Honda CR 125, I would be able to get these plastics to fit almost perfectly. This was one time where I slipped up on one of my initial ideas where I was going to spend no money where I didn't need to. Although I thought just because the final product would look so much better, I would feel a lot better about it, it would be worth it. I did have one more though. I planned on this one a little earlier in the project though, as I was given some money specifically to spend on an upgrade on the bike, and that was the exhaust system. The pipe here and the muffler there are the two pieces I purchased. They were Italian grade, racing, and they were just so nice, and I couldn't help spending too much money on them. So these were the two things where I did spend money where I didn't need to, but eventually I thought it was worth it. So with everything ready to go back on, I started piecing the bike back together. I was surprised how smoothly it went. I was not confident that I would be able to do it as quickly as I did. The bike went from being in boxes to basically full assembled within about a week. With everything back together, the bike ready to go again, I had to figure out the last step, and that was the graphics. This is the same as like paint you put on the outside of a car, but on a dirt bike it's stickers. And what most people do nowadays is they advertise every component that they have on the bike. And I wasn't really big into this just because it felt too flashy. I didn't want my bike to be an advertisement. I also wasn't sponsored, so it felt kind of strange. So I decided that I wanted to remodel the 1985 stock CR 125 design with the blue seat and the classic red, white, and blue Honda wing. I came pretty close to it, and here is the final product. Since I finished last week, I've been trying to ride as much as possible. I'm not very good, but it was really nice to be able to compare what it felt like to ride the bike before I had done any work to it and after I was finished. I don't think they appreciate me much at the fellowship, but I thought for the purposes of my project, it would be all right to have a lot of fun up there. And yeah, it's so much fun. Even riding it a few times, I feel like I've really progressed, and it's fast and dangerous and everything I love. This project, I not only learned a ton about motorcycle maintenance and motorcycles themselves, but I also learned a lot about myself. There was countless times throughout this project where I seriously doubted that I would be able to achieve what I had set out for myself at the beginning. I had no clue what I was doing most of the time, but was able to figure my way out of situations that I probably shouldn't have been able to. And it was really incredible for me to go into this project knowing nothing about this bike specifically, and coming out and knowing every detailed aspect of it. This was something for me that was just, I didn't know about myself, and I look at that and I have to feel proud, because it's something that I built with my hands, and that's really impressive to me. Well, I do say that I did most of this project on my own. There was definitely no shortage of support along the way. Firstly, I need to thank my in-school mentor, Miss Radefeld. She kept me on track throughout the entire project. We met up, set up calendars, made sure I was keeping up to date with what I had said from the beginning. But she also showed a lot of interest in the project, despite the fact that I think I probably knew as little as she did about it. Secondly, I need to thank my parents, not only for living in a house that smelled like petroleum and paint constantly, but also for hiring me last minute to be the new paid dog walker when my bank account hit zero. That was very helpful. And also just for the countless other ways that they supported me. My grandparents, who from hundreds of miles away, still found ways to support me financially. That was really helpful. I wouldn't have been able to finish it without them. I also need to thank Emily and Matt, my siblings, for trying really hard to find a way up onto the thank you slide. I was generous. I gave it to them. I also had help from families who lent me vehicles, friends who gave me their expertise wherever they could, or let me use tools of theirs that I didn't otherwise have. I need to especially thank my friend Ryan, who he came to my house whenever I needed him. We went out to look at bikes, almost missed some of his college classes to look at bikes, and he was a huge help throughout the whole project, took pictures whenever I needed, lent me some of his tools, and without him I wouldn't have been able to create such a nice looking thing. And also my neighbor Dorji, he was one of the biggest supporters of my project from the get-go. He was the person that really encouraged me to go through with it, and he also would just show up at my garage when I was working late at night. We talked cars, talked bikes. He bought me parts that I needed to get the project on its feet and helped me up until the last stages, and overall was just a great person to have alongside during this project. And lastly, I need to thank my mentor, Jim Batachi. He's an expert with this kind of stuff, which is one of the reasons why I tried to veer away from him a lot from this project, because I knew that would just be such an easy way for me to get off track and use outside support. But despite the fact that we did not meet very frequently, I knew that if I ever needed him, I could call and he would be there right away. And I'm really grateful for that. And yes, everyone that helped me, if I didn't mention you, I'm very grateful for all the support I had along the way. And now I can answer some questions. I can't see. You can just yell it out. Oh, up there.
Okay. How fast is it?
I don't have a speedometer, but I think I've gotten close to like 50. Not sure. It's not meant for high speeds, but probably around there. Don't know specifically. Another.
When did you start doing this?
I bought the bike at the very end of last summer and started working on it right around when the school year started. One more up there and then grades.
Around how much time did it take you?
Ooh, I don't know. Weekends were probably average 8 to 10 hours. Weekdays, a few hours every day. A lot. Too many. Grace.
What's your favorite part and or detail of the bike?
Favorite part and or detail. I mean, the expansion chamber, the big fat type I bought is very beautiful. And it also because it's raw steel, it colors with heat, so it's turning a little blue in parts, and it's just continued surprises. All right, I think that's it.
No,
Oh,
a few more.
Oh, Mr. Davis.
Where are you planning on riding? Is there a place where you hope to take it to ride, or?
You have a nice backyard. I don't know, fellowship around here, kind of, maybe up north. Miss Montaglione.
Do you promise in front of everyone that you'll wear a helmet?
Of course. Yes, I would do that for my own sake, not for anyone else. Yes.
What was the most frustrating part of the restoration?
There was there's a steering stem bearing which I tried to remove by myself and ended up destroying it and needed to have it hydraulically pressed out, and that took that was something that if I'd done it right, it would have taken a few hours, but ended up taking like a few weeks. Also, the pipe and the muffler were a very tight fit. And putting on the front tire was a disaster. I popped the inner tube like 3 times and damaged the rim. But there was frustrating stuff, but I got past it eventually. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.